of the world, and may his peace and blessings be upon our Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and his pure immaculate Ahlul Bayt. With your permission, just start off. Someone asked me 3 questions, or 3 questions here. Let's get rid of these first, and then there's nothing better.
You won't get it. We have more questions. Don't worry.
Why or why not is it appropriate for a girl or a girl's family to approach a boy for the intent of marriage? Is there Islamic reason or is it cultural only? It's cultural only. It has nothing to do with Islam. But probably your generation will have to burn and tolerate this. But the next generation, then this will be more freer. But respect your parents in this regard. You are the burning generation. It is a very serious response. If giving information to a non-Muslim about Islam, what are the first few points, facts, that should be expressed to this Christian or Jewish person to encourage their desire to look into Islam more? You have to focus on the dimensions of love which Islam has to give. The definition of love and the way Islam interprets love, no other religion has. And then you accompany that with the sacrifices and the divine love which the Ahlul Bayt have. When comes the time that a brother or sister decides to seek a spouse, there's no particular time. How can these youth get together Islamically so that they could actually learn some others' personalities? Can you give a few examples of activities for these youth? This will take time. Tonight I want to touch upon one of Allama Tabataba'i's more controversial theories that he has. But before I expound on this theory of Allama Tabatabai, and I'll be reciting from the original book of his, it needs an introduction. And the introduction is quite long, so you have to bear with me. The Holy Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, إِنَّا مَعَاشِرَ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ نُكَلِّمُ النَّاسِ عَلَى قَدْرِ عُقُولِهِمْ. Verily, we prophets, we speak to the people in accordance with their reason. From generation to generation to generation, the capacity for reason alters. Things that we understand now, we shouldn't take for granted. They weren't absolutes, or they weren't self-evident generations ago. But every prophet, when he comes and speaks with the people, when he wants to exhibit or disseminate Islamic ma'rifah, he does so in accordance with the capacity of reason and understanding that the common people at that time possess. And there are always differences, but the norm amongst the people, it would never exceed the capacity of the people in relation to knowledge. So with this tradition, we see that some matters in Islamic ma'rifah were not openly accessible to some groups of people. They weren't openly accessible. Not that they were hidden altogether. I'll tell you, I'll explain it in a minute. So there exists esoteric dimensions, and this tradition demonstrates that clearly. But these esoteric dimensions aren't explicitly discussed. They're alluded to, but they're not openly accessible. It's not because these esoteric dimensions were they to be given to a given people, they may have rejected faith. So the prophets would discuss these esoteric dimensions in accordance with the understanding of the people. They wouldn't go and explain the esoteric dimensions as they are, otherwise that would have been problematic. Not everyone was ready to take these kind of data in. So this is not to say that Ma'rifah was hidden or inaccessible, period, to the people. Nothing was hidden. Rather, these truths were revealed and manifested in a simple fashion for the people to understand. Those very deep, esoteric truths, those very complex data, they were revealed. But in a manner that people can understand in accordance with their own reasoning. The doors to the ultimate truths were open by means of these traditions, but everyone to their own understanding. So in summary, in short, the quantity of the message, the quantity of Islamic Ma'rifah was never compromised, but the quality and the method of dissemination, that was administered carefully. Each prophet to his own people in a specific way. Otherwise, if those esoteric truths weren't simplified or weren't transmitted in accordance with people's understanding, anything could have. They may have become atheists, they may have rejected faith, they may have changed faith, and so on and so forth. There's a tradition that states, Inna hadithana sa'abun mustas'ab. Our traditions are difficult and complicated. لا يحتمله إلا ملك مقرب أو نبي مرسل أو عبد مؤمن امتحن الله قلبه بالإيمان. Our traditions are difficult and complicated. No one understands them, no one can bear them, save for the archangels, for the messengers, and for believers upon whom Allah has tested with Iman and they've passed the test. There's one tradition where Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, Inna min hadithina, amongst our traditions are those that ma la yahtamiluhu malakun muqarrab or nabiyyun mursal or abdul mu'min. There are even some traditions that no one understands, no archangel understands, no messenger can understand. Say that of the Holy Messenger of Islam. No believing mu'min can understand. This is even higher now than the previous class of traditions. Then there was a question and they said, so who can understand them? Nahnu nahtamiluhu. Only we, 12 Imams or the 14 Ma'soom, only we can bear them. So this shows a classification of traditions, that these esoteric truths are a lot, and according to one's degree and capacity of understanding, they can grasp the message, each to their own. And then we have a tradition by Imam Baqir alayhi salam. Inna hadithana sa'bun mustas'abun dhakwanun ajrad. Our traditions are difficult, complicated. Dhakwanun, elite, and ajrad, untouchable. لا يحتمله ملك مقرب ولا نبي مرسل ولا عبد امتحن الله قلبه للإيمان. No archangel understands them, no messenger, and no mu'min who's been tested by Allah. Iman-wise, no one understands them. Only the Imams understand them. It's only the Imams who can transmit them, but in a specific manner. Then he describes these four classes of traditions. أما الصعب فهو الذي لم يركب بعده. The sa'ab, the difficult traditions, are those that can't be rode upon. You can't control them. You encounter it, but you can't ride over these traditions. It's difficult. You can't take control. وأما المستصعب فهو الذي يهرب منه إذا رؤي. The complicated traditions are those that escape you when you recite them. You don't even have time to encounter them or try to ride upon them. They'll flee before you even before you want to grasp the message. وَأَمَّا الذَّكْوَانِ فَهُوَ ذُكَاءُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. The elite traditions are those that only the elite of the mu'mineen can understand. Although ذُكَاءُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, the dhukā has also been translated as the source of agitation for the true mu'mineen, i.e. even the true mu'mineen that Allah has examined and they've passed iman-wise, they get agitated when they try to understand these traditions. وَأَمَّا الْأَجْوَادِ فَهُوَ الَّذِي لَا يَتَعَلَّقُ بِهِ شَيْءٌ مِنْ بَيْنِ يَدَيْهِ وَلَا مِنْ خَلْفِهِ وَهُوَ قَوْلُ اللَّهُ نَزَّلَ أَحْسَنَ الْحَدِيثِ. And the ajwad, the fourth class, which were the untouchable traditions, are those that nothing can be associated with it. You have no idea how to approach it. And that is alluded to in chapter 39:23, when Allah says Allah has revealed the best of discourses. And then the holy Imam continues, فَأَحْسَنَ الْحَدِيثِ. These best of discourses, hadithuna, is our traditions. لَا يَحْتَمِلُ أَحَدٌ مِنَ الْخَلَائِقِ أَمْرَهِ بِكَمَالِهِ. No one, no creature, no creation, no one can bear this class of traditions in its entirety, بِكَمَالِهِ. حتى يحده لأنه من حد الشيء فهو أكبر منه. Unless they have been limited, they've come down they've been manifested in a more limited form than what the esoteric dimension actually is. Only then can people understand it. And verily, man had the shay'a, and whenever one limits a thing, that thing is greater than the limited. When you limit the essential truth, the limited is limited. That essential truth is greater, but one can't gain access to it. So, in short, our spirits, if you imagine them as containers, they're limited. And in order to derive and understand deep esoteric truths, those deep esoteric truths have to be limited and manifested in a manner that people understand. Now with the times, people's understanding gets better and better, stronger and stronger. In Surah Al-Ikhlas, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ, there are traditions that say that only the people at the end of time will truly understand what this surah is implying. So this shows that with time, people's knowledge, people's capacity to reason will be more. But many generations ago, the imams were limited. They couldn't say everything. Sometimes the imams were approached by two different people with the same question, and they would give two different responses. One such example is with Imam Rida alayhi salam, where once he was asked by someone, can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fit the world in an egg? Now, understanding that person's limitations of knowledge, being very simple, Imam answered in this way that, don't you see that your eye, which is small, can see the mountains and so much? He wanted to suffice with that, because if he had given the true response, that person may have lost faith. What, Allah can't do that? And he may have changed his faith or not accepted the message of Islam. One has to be very careful when they're speaking to others. People's capacity differs. The same question was asked by someone who was more of a thinker, and the Imam replied, Allah's power, it doesn't include the impossible. Very simple. And that person understands that. No, you can't fit the world in an egg. Don't ask for impossible things. Allah's power doesn't encompass the impossible. Now, portraying the multi-layered, multi-dimensional, esoteric nature of religion, there are a number of traditions. I'll just focus on two. In one, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, Inna amrana. Verily, in our religion, huwa al-haq. There is haq, wa haqqul haq, and there is haq of haq. Since haq, you all know what it means. There's no need to translate. We have haq, we have haqqul haq. Wa huwa al-zahir, we have a zahir, the apparent meaning. Wa batin al-zahir, and the inner aspect of the apparent meaning. Wa batin al-batin, inner aspect of the inner meaning. Wa huwa sir, and we have secrets. Wa sirru sir, and secrets of secrets. Wa sirru mustasar, and covered secrets. Wa sirru muqna'un bis-sir, and secrets that are covered by secrets. Now, that's probably lost you all. So I thought just to give some examples of what that tradition means. In our religion we have haq. For example, salat. Salat is a haq. And we have haqqul haq. And haqqul haq, knowing the haq of salat. We have to appreciate the haq of salat. When we execute the salat, that presence that we are in, whose presence are we in? Have you appreciated? Have you established whose presence you're in? Are you doing the salat as it should be done? Haqqan? And then the deen, our religion, shows what the haqq is, what salat is, and also illustrates and demonstrates how the haqq of this haqq must be executed. We have a dhahir, which is an open, apparent command. For example, it's wajib to fast. Wa batin al-zahir, the inner meaning of this command to fast, which is that fasting is a shield against hell. That is the inner meaning of fasting. That's why we fast. Now this shield against hell doesn't only mean the hell in the hereafter, but also the hell in this world. The lust, the anger, different animalistic features that during fasting we have to try and shield ourselves against, which will be manifested as hell in the hereafter. That's the batin, this command to fast. But batin or batin, the inner meaning of this shielding against hell, that's tantamount to that true proximity towards Allah that we want to acquire. That's the ultimate reason behind fasting and all other ibadah. وَهُوَ السِّرُّ, and we have secrets. Now one example of a secret is this tradition, which At the end of the tradition, the Imam says to Abu Basir, this is a secret. Don't give this out. Don't give this out to the common lay people. Keep it within our circles. And the tradition is this. When Abu Basir asked Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, هل يراه المؤمنون يوم القيامة? Do the believers see Allah on the day of resurrection? The Imam alayhi salam replied, نعم وقد رأوه قبل يوم القيامة حين قال لهم ألست بربكم قالوا بلى. The Imam said, yes, on the day of resurrection, the mu'min will see Allah. And they will see Allah before the day of resurrection. Then Abu Basir said, when the Imam replied, when Allah said to them, am I not your Lord? And they said, yes. This is referring to Adam and Dhar. We were there present before Allah too. And then the Imam paused for a while, and then he said, إِنَّ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ لَيَرَوْنَهُ فِي الدُّنْيَا قَبْلَ يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. Verily the mu'mineen will see Allah in this world, فِي الدُّنْيَا, before the day of resurrection. And then Abu Basir said, can I give this out to the compare, tell this to the lay people? And the Imam said, no, this is a secret. This is too early to disseminate before everyone. So the secret here is seeing Allah in this world. We have access to seeing Allah. And then the secret of this secret is that we see Him with the eyes of the fitra. It's within. This seeing is all within. Islam explains that with ma'rifatul nafs, how one can acquire this seeing. And then wasirul mustasar, a sir which is covered. And these get more and more complicated. But this sirul mustasar, maybe it's referring to the station of fana. And the sir which is covered by sir is referring to the station of baqa. Now with your permission, I won't speak about these two today. But tomorrow, inshallah, I'll speak about these two stations there. Another tradition by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, when he said, Inna lil-Qur'an dhaharan wa batna. There's a apparent meaning, and there are esoteric meanings. There are exoteric meanings and esoteric meanings. وَلِبَتْنِهِ batna. And in those esoteric meanings, within them, there are more esoteric meanings. إِلَى سَبْعَةِ أَبْطُنٍ. While within those esoteric meanings, there are further, deeper esoteric meanings, and repeat that 7 times, each within the other. And in some traditions, it relates 70 times. So we have one esoteric dimension, go deeper and deeper 70 times, each having an esoteric meaning of the one above. We're getting closer to the main subject. Just want to... In relation to the topic or theme of predestination, jabr, and free will, tafweed, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam once said that we believe in neither. And then the questioner asked, فَأَيُّ شَيْءٍ هُوَ أَصْلَحَكَ اللَّهُ. May Allah grant you reform, or أَصْلَحَكَ اللَّهُ. I don't know how to translate that. But, so which one is it? What is it? What's the answer to this? And the Imam stroked his hand 2 or 3 times, and then replied, لو أجبتك في. If I was to answer you in this regard, لكفرت, you would most certainly acquire kufr. Now this applies to that person. But you see, everyone to their own level of understanding. Now the following has been attributed to the 4th holy successor, to the Holy Prophet of Islam, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, what he said, Inni la'aktumu min ilmi jawahira. Verily I conceal the substance of my knowledge. كي لا يرى الحق ذو جهل فيفتتنا, so that the ignorant don't become aware of it, otherwise they would cut me into pieces. Just imagine what that knowledge is, that the mu'mineen will cut him into pieces. وَقَدْ تَقَدَّمَ فِي هَذَا أَبُو حَسَنٍ, and this was the case of Abu Hassan, Amir al-Mu'mineen. He practiced the same course of action. إِلَى الْحُسَيْنِ وَوَسَّى قَبْلَهُ الْحَسَنَ, how he had instructed to Imams Hassan and Imams Hussein to act in such a manner, to conceal one's knowledge. وَرُبَّ جَوْهَرِ عِلْمٍ لَوْ أَبُوهُ بِهِ, there's so much knowledge that were I to disclose it, لَقِيلَ لِي أَنْتَ مِمَّنْ يَعْبُدُ الْوَثَنَ, it would be said to me, were I to disclose this knowledge, it would be said to me, you are amongst those who worship idols. وَلَا اسْتَحَلَّ رِجَالٌ مُسْلِمُونَ دَمِي, and they, the Muslims, would deem the spilling of my blood as legitimate. يَرَوْنَ أَقْبَحَ مَا يَأْتُونَهُ حَسَنًا, and they would regard the most ugliest of actions towards me as proper. That's what the true knowledge can do. So they couldn't disclose everything. Okay. Now, pay attention to this important tradition, and then we go to the main discussion. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, ذكرت التقية يوما عند علي بن Hussein. One day, the question of taqiyya, dissimulation, came up in the presence of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. فقال, the holy Imam said, Imam Sajjad, والله لو علم أبو ذر ما في قلب سلمان لقتله. If, by Allah I swear, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam said, if Abu Dhar knew what was in the heart of Salman, لَقَتَلَهُ, he would most certainly have killed him. Now, Abu Dhar and Salman are both companions, true companions, alim companions of the Holy Prophet. Now, this is very difficult to bear. That if Abu Dhar knew what was in the heart of Salman, he would have killed him. Some scholars have tried to explain this tradition in a way that doesn't lead to such thing happening. And they're playing with the pronouns here. That if Abu Dhar knew what was in the heart of Salman, لَقَتَلَهُ. لَقَتَلَهُ, the lam, the la, is just an emphatic particle, just most certainly. قَتَلَهُ. قَتَلَهُ has two pronouns here. There's a huwa, which is in the qatala. It's a nominative pronoun, the subject. As they say in Arabic, the marfu pronoun, the doer. This doer would have killed who? The who is an accusative pronoun, the object which is receiving the killing. There are two pronouns therefore. Now these scholars say that the huwa in a qatala is referring to the knowledge of Abu Dhar, and the who is referring to Abu Dhar. So if Abu Dhar knew what was in the heart of Salman, Abu Dhar's knowledge would have killed him, would have killed Abu Dhar, because of that very sublime status of knowledge that Salman had. if Abu Dhar knew of that and became aware of that, it would have killed him. However, that seems not to be the case, to play around with these pronouns, because the question is a question of taghiyyah. The context of the tradition is speaking of taghiyyah. So most probably the meaning is that Abu Dhar would have killed him. Now how he would have killed him, some say that he would have disclosed Salman's apostasy to the people, and the people would have killed him, or he would have killed him himself, believing that his nature, his knowledge is not on a par with Islamic teachings, but this is the tradition. وَلَقَدْ آخَى رَسُولُ اللَّهِ بَيْنَهُمَا. And the Holy Messenger of Allah established ties of brotherhood between these two. إِنَّ عِلْمَ الْعُلَمَاءِ سَعَبٌ مُسْتَسَعٌ. Let's continue. The knowledge of the ulama, here it's saying the knowledge of the ulama, is difficult and complicated. Don't forget, the ulama is a plural of alim, not alim. لا يحتمله إلا نبي مرسل أو ملك مقرب أو عبد مؤمن. No one can bear this knowledge save for these three classes that we've mentioned before: the archangels, the messengers, and the believing woman. فقال, then Imam Sajjad said, وَإِنَّمَا صَارَ سَلْمَانٌ مِنَ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Salman became one of the ulama لأنه امرأ منا أهل البيت, because barely he was one of us, Ahlul Bayt, and that's when he became Alim, a true Alim. فَلِذَلِكَ نِسْبَتُهُ إِلَى الْعُلَمَاءِ. That's why we've attributed him as being one of the ulama. Now things get a bit tricky now, so you have to bear with me. But before I start this discussion, these are just perspectives. It's not the common perspective amongst the scholars, but it's a perspective which Abdullah Tabatawi had. But don't think this is it. I mean, the general understanding, the common perspective amongst the ulama, don't accept this. But it's good to share these ideas with you, because this perspective has its advantages too. Not only practically, but theoretically. It can solve many dilemmas maybe. علماء أمتي أفضل من أنبياء بني إسرائيل. The ulama, the Holy Prophet of Islam said this, the ulama of my ummah are superior to the prophets of Bani Israel, which includes most of the 124,000 prophets. First of all, ulama, don't forget, is someone who is alim. And the last tradition spoke about the knowledge of the ulama in relation to Salman. And just before I continue, just one other note if I can just mention. We have prophets, messengers, okay, prophets Anbiya, messengers of Rasul, and we have imams. Prophets are those who receive revelation, and they also give the halal and the harams to the people by means of that revelation. They also have a responsibility to fight against oppression, but they have no responsibility to establish Islamic governance, to establish governance. It's not their responsibility. The imam doesn't receive revelation, but it's their responsibility to establish governance. Whoever's an imam has to establish governance. If imamat is given to a nabi, that nabi becomes a rasul. And it's necessary for that rasul, that nabi plus imam, to establish governance. whether you're an Imam or a Nabi or a Rasul, that thing which you must have in order to make you possess one of these positions is wilaya. And I'll speak about this more inshallah tomorrow. But the degrees of wilaya here meaning that proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are different. The more wilaya you have, the higher you will be. An Imam may have more wilaya than the Prophet. It's possible. A Prophet may have more wilaya than an Imam. Whoever has more wilaya has more knowledge. Someone who's not a Prophet may have more wilaya than a Prophet. And that was the story between Hazrat Khizr and Hazrat Musa alayhi salam. Hazrat Khizr, the wilaya he had was more than the wilaya that Hazrat Musa, who was a messenger of Allah, had. It's the degree of wilaya here. Now, the tradition says that علماء أمتي أفضل من أنبياء بني إسرائيل. The ulama, those who are alim, amongst the ummah of the Holy Prophet of Islam, were more superior to all the prophets, save that of the Holy Prophet of Islam. Salman was more superior than all preceding prophets. How can that be? Now, to understand this, we have to some 2 or 3 points. And then we'll discover that even you, as people who are members of the Ummah of the Holy Prophet, we have that potential to raise ourselves to such a degree that we can be superior to all preceding prophets. How? Why? Each prophet came to certain people with a certain book. The Jews have a book, the Christians have a book, we have a book. The potential. Now these books are all revelation, but it's false to say all these books are equal. First of all, the Holy Book, the Holy Quran, was a miracle of our Prophet. Those books weren't deemed as miracles. The potential that the Holy Quran, the spiritual potential that the Holy Quran can take someone is much higher than the spiritual potential that the New Testament can take someone towards Allah. Is much higher than the spiritual potential that the Old Testament, the Torah, can take people towards Allah. This is the Quran. The Quran is much higher than the other books. True, they're all revelation. They share that lowest common denominator with one another. But you can't compare the Quran with other books. In the same way you can't compare the Holy Prophet with other prophets. Okay, we may speak of the unity of all religions, yes, but that's the minimum. That's the minimum we share. Which text do you see Allah described like the Quran has described Allah? Where do you see Allah described in the same way that Allah has been described in Sahih Sajjadiyya? Where do you see Allah described in such a way as described by Amir al-Mu'mineen in Nahjul Balagha? The potential is much higher. The potential towards Allah is much higher. We are the members of this Ummah of the Holy Prophet. Yes, Hazrat Ibrahim, for example, he reached the maximum in relation to his book. Hazrat Musa was Ma'soom, reached the maximum in relation to the Torah. Prophet Jesus in relation to the Injil, and so on and so forth. They reached that maximum. Their followers could only reach that maximum. But in the Quran, the maximum is higher than was the maximum with the divine books before. We have the capacity to reach levels, and I'm going to bring some Quranic backing in a minute. We Muslims have the capacity, the potential to reach such spiritual levels that Prophet Ibrahim implored to reach, but Allah wouldn't grant it to him because it wasn't possible. That Hazrat Yusuf desired and implored from Allah, but Allah didn't give it to him because it wasn't possible for him. But we have that potential to reach those degrees. The minimum that all prophets were, they were mukhlas. All prophets were mukhlas. And when they became a mukhlas, they became infallible, ma'soom. Before that, according to Hanamat al-Tawari, before coming to mukhlas, they wouldn't do anything against Ismat, but they weren't ma'soom. Ismat was acquired at a certain age, and from then on they were mukhlas. Now from mukhlas to the highest degree towards Allah, it's infinity. The highest degree is called the degree of Salihin. Not Salihin, the literal meaning, which means righteous. All prophets were righteous. It's a specific degree. It's the maximum degree of the Mukhlasin. We'll come to that in a minute. But before I continue, when Ustad in Rome said that whenever you want to study a religion, see this is one route of establishing that Islam is the ultimate religion. See what that religion has to say about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do they have anything new to say? When you compare Islam and its previous religion, the gap is very wide. The terminology in relation to Allah, the descriptions in relation to Allah, these weren't even mentioned in previous texts. Now, there are many false religions today who have nothing to add. Whatever they have is from Islam. One such religion is that of the Baha'is, which you may have heard. I'm not sure whether they have a presence in San Diego. They do everywhere, right? Be respectful to them. Don't disrespect them or anything, or whenever you see them, yes. They're human beings. But I've come across them quite a bit in England, and there they have nothing new to give. Everything they say is extracted from the Islamic text, but they just change a few of the apparent rulings, the Zahiri, external rulings in Islam. Once, that religion was started by someone called Bab, Muhammad Ali Bab. And then he said the next prophet will come in 1,000 years' time. And then the next prophet came in 15 years' time. That was Baha. And then when they said, but Bob said in 1,000 years' time, he said that's just the allegorical meaning. But the next prophet will come in 1,000 years' time, after Baha. Once there's a page in Bayan. Bayan is the book written by Bob. Baha has written books including Kitab al-Aqdas, which is like what we have as the Quran. When I read the Bayan, there was this page where Bob says that sperm is now park, is tahir, because the Prophet after me has to come from sperm that is park. Okay? I showed this page to a Baha'i without telling him where it's from, because the Baha'i youth have no idea whatsoever in relation to the ancient texts. Well, not ancient, the original text. Because if they were to read what is in these texts, they would never accept it. They just occupy themselves with these sound bites, all the world is one, peace for everyone, that kind of thing, which we also believe in, but within limits. So I showed the page, and the boy said, "What's this rubbish you're showing me?" And I said, this is Bob's works. And then he didn't speak to me ever again. But the interesting thing was this. Even a 2-year-old understands
صلي على محمد وآل محمد.
But the interesting thing is this, that Baha, who was the following prophet, was 3 years older than Bob. Did anyone get it? So when you say sperm is park, so the future prophets are from pure sperm, well, he was already created before with the magic sperm. Anyway, they have a lot of contradictions like this. But they don't like it when you tell them. Right, now, one of the most important routes to reach Allah is through Salat. As-salatu mi'rajul mu'min. Salat constitutes 4 phrases, its essence. Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. Subhanallah is seen in previous texts of previous divine scriptures. You may have heard hallelujah when they say, that means Subhanallah. Alhamdulillah exists in previous texts. Praise be to Allah, we have it in their text. La ilaha illallah also exists. But no religion has Allahu Akbar. You can't find that. That phrase cannot be found in any divine scripture preceding Islam. Now, I want to tell you, in relation to the reason for this, says the stations of perfection that have been, this book is Lubul Lubab, kernel of the kernel, concerning the wayfaring and spiritual journey of the people of intellect. It's Allama Tabataboi's version. It was compiled and edited and expanded by one of his students. This has been translated into English. I don't advise you to read it alone because some of the terms may be confusing. If you read it with someone, you can ask questions just in case you don't get the other side of the message. The stations of perfection that have been mentioned and whose characteristics and qualities have been described briefly thus far are effusions emanating from the Almighty Lord that are exclusive to the Ummah of the seal of the Prophets and Apostles, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, may Allah bless him, and his Prophet. Perfections attained by wayfarers of previous nations and past religions were, in fact, very limited. After attaining the station of annihilation, which is fana, which I'll speak about tomorrow, inshallah, On fana, you become mukhlas. After attaining the station of annihilation, they were only able to witness God's names and attributes, but could not think of a higher station. The mystery to this limitation was that the ultimate achievement of their gnosis, ma'rifah, was realization of the truth contained in La ilaha illallah, the effects of which leads one to witness the divine essence that encompasses only all attributes of His perfection and beauty. But wayfarers of the Ummah of the noblest messenger have gone far beyond this station and have realized subsequent stations that cannot be described or defined. The reason is that all injunctions and precepts of Islam point to the fact that Allahu Akbar min an yusaf. Allah is greater than which can be described. Based on this fact, stations traversed by a Muslim traveller inevitably lead to a point that cannot be explained or contained in ordinary description and expository expression. This is in effect due to the relationship that exists between spiritual travelling in Islam and the profound and blessed word that Allah is greater than that which is described. For this reason, the earlier prophets themselves did not think of a station beyond that of witnessing divine names and attributes, so that they could set out on the wings of determination and fly toward that designated nest. Hence, and this is important, whenever they were afflicted, those previous prophets, whenever they were afflicted with various kinds of trials in the world, they would appeal to and find deliverance in the spiritual and supersensory initiatic power of the noblest messenger and Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima al-Zahra and her pure offsprings. It was this very station of greatest spiritual and supersensory authority, Walayatul Kubra, which delivered those previous prophets from their afflictions and ordeals. That was in relation to Allahu Akbar not being present in the previous scriptures, and since the Holy Messenger had it and the Imams had it, that they would do tawassul in relation to them, in relation to different ordeals and trials. Now, this second point, that some prophets wanted to become a true Muslim, at maximum Muslim. They wanted to become one of the Salihun, but Allah said, no, you can't. We'll give it to you in the hereafter. Allah writes, nevertheless, there is a more superior and more exalted station than that of Mukhlas. Here it says sincerity, but it's referring to Mukhlas. There's a station more exalted than the Mukhlasin, which they, the previous prophets, did not attain, and prayed and hoped to reach in the hereafter. For instance, although according to the Quranic ordinance, Yusuf alayhi salam was amongst those who were mukhlas. In chapter 12:24, إِنَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِنَا الْمُخْلَصِينَ. Verily Yusuf is one of our mukhlas servants. However, in his prayers, he would beseech God to join him with the righteous ones, with the Salihin, in their station. And he would supplicate, saying, Anta waliyi, you, O Lord, my wali, fi dunya wal akhirah, in this world and the hereafter. Tawaffani muslima, make me die a Muslim. That maximum potential of the Muslim, the member of the Ummah of the Holy Messenger, can acquire. Prophet Yusuf is saying, make me die a Muslim. وَأَلْحِقْنِي بِالصَّالِحِينَ, and join me to the righteous ones. So he wasn't one of the Salihin. Salihin being that specific station, not the literal meaning. he wanted to die a true Muslim, and he wanted to join the ranks of the Salihin, something which was only accessible to the Ummah of the Holy Prophet. Then Allah continues, as is clear, he, referring to Yusuf alayhi salam, did not attain the station of righteousness in this world, and prayed that this station may be granted to him after death and in the hereafter. However, whether his prayers were answered and he attained the station of Salihin in the hereafter cannot be inferred from the Quranic verses. Similarly though, Ibrahim alayhi salam did possess a high rank in the station of Mukhlasin. In his supplication, Ibrahim would say, Rabbi, habli hukman wa alhiqni bis salihin. Chapter 26:83. My Lord, grant me wisdom and unite me with the righteous. Hence, the status of the station of Salihin is higher than that of the station of Mukhlasin. Mukhlasin being the minimum for Ismat. Ismat too has many degrees. And Ibrahim alayhi salam begged his Lord to connect him to those who had attained this station. God did not fulfill his prayer in this world, but promised it to him in the hereafter, saying in chapter 230, وَلَقَدْ اسْتَفَيْنَاهُ فِي الدُّنْيَا. We gave him a distinction in this world, or verily we chose him in the world, وَإِنَّهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ لَمِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ. And certainly in the hereafter, he will be one of the Salihin. Because if you become mukhlas in this world, you can still spiritually elevate. Being mukhlas is tantamount, synonymous to that hayatun tayyibah we discussed last time. Whoever acquires hayatun tayyibah is a mukhlas. I'll speak more about this tomorrow, inshallah, about the intricacies involved in being the mukhlas. If you become mukhlas in this world, you can elevate in barzakh, you can elevate in qiyamah to such a status that you can then join higher ranks that you didn't have in this world. It should be known, Allah says, that this level of righteousness, the Salihin, which according to the Quran earlier prophets aspired to, is different from that which was granted to Ibrahim and his descendants, as we read in the statement of God, exalted is He, in chapter 21:72, and we bestowed upon him Ishaq and Ya'qub as a gift. All of them we made righteous. This righteous is different to that station of the righteous. For all of them, including Ibrahim alayhi salam, possessed such an epithet, such a title. Nevertheless, Ibrahim prayed for the attainment of righteousness. Hence, this station of righteousness is a more exalted and superior station. Now, this is important. The fact that the Prophet of Allah, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and some of his contemporaries had reached this same rank of Salihin is substantiated by the noble verse of the Quran which speaks on behalf of the Prophet himself. In chapter 796, Inna waliyyi Allahu alladhi nazzala al-kitaba wa huwa yatawalla as-salihin. Verily my wali is Allah, who has sent down the scripture, and He takes care of the righteous. Allah writes, first of all, in this verse, the Prophet affirms the absolute walaya of the one over himself, and says that my wali is he who takes care of the affairs of the righteous. Secondly, it becomes clear that at the time of the Prophet, there lived some individuals from among the sincere ones who had reached the station of Salihin, and Allah the Sustainer took care of their affairs. From what has been said, the mystery of the prayers of earlier prophets and their appeal to the 5 members of the household of purity, the Abad, the Panchtan, or the pure Imams becomes clear, and the exalted status of the Imam station of righteousness becomes more evident, a status so exalted that Ibrahim alayhi salam beseeched God to be connected to them. In Ziyarat Ashura, when we say Allahumma ij'al mahyaya mahya Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad, we're not playing with words here. We have to understand what we are asking. We want our lives to be assigned as the lives of Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This is something very, very hard. Or elsewhere where it says, وَأَسْأَلُهُ أَن يُبَلِّغَنِي الْمَقَامَ الْمَحْمُودِ لَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. We're asking for Maqam al-Mahmud, that the Imams had before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maqam al-Mahmud is even higher than the station of Salihin. These are things that are accessible to us as members of the Ummah of the Holy Prophet. Now, inshallah, tomorrow I'll explore what Mukhlas is and how one can acquire it, inshallah, for tomorrow. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Any questions?
Question about the Tarikh.
Maybe it was a bit too dry today's session, but tomorrow's will be interesting.
Thank you.
Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.